No matter where you live in Canada, Alberta, PEI, or anywhere in between, part of our taxes goes into a system that tries to keep things fair between provinces.
And that system is called equalization payments.
But what does fair really mean in that case?
And is it actually fair for everyone?
This year, Quebec will receive $13.6 billion in transfer payments, all while Western provinces like Alberta won't get a single dollar.
This imbalance fuels the feeling, especially in places like Alberta, that they are paying the bill for other provinces. And these feelings get so strong that some provinces talk about separating from Canada.
So why is this program so controversial that some say it threatens national unity?
How does it actually work?
How's the money spent?
And are there better ways to run it? Maybe by looking at how other countries do it?
Every one of us living and working in Canada pays federal income tax and federal sales tax. Corporations and businesses pay their federal corporate tax. All of this is collected into one federal tax pot in Ottawa.
From there, the government decides how to distribute it. Some of it goes directly to federal programs like defense and immigration. Another portion is sent back to the provinces to help fund services like healthcare, education, and infrastructure. Those are the areas that are managed at the provincial level.
And then there's a special portion, equalization payments. These payments are sent to provinces whose ability to raise money, something called fiscal capacity, falls below the national average. The goal is to help those provinces offer comparable public services without having to overtax their residents. The exact amount each province receives is determined through a formula called the equalization formula.
So who receives what?
The three territories, Yukon, Northwest Territories, and Nunavut, don't actually receive equalization payments like the provinces do. Instead, they get support through a different program called Territorial Formula Financing. It is a yearly, no-strings-attached transfer that helps them deal with the much higher costs of delivering public services up north.
Think of it like this. If every province were a runner in a race, equalization payment is meant to make sure everyone starts from the same starting line. These payments are not there to make sure everyone finishes at the same time or in the same place. That is up to each province to manage.
The goal of this program is not to make everyone equal in wealth. Far from it. It's about making sure that every Canadian, no matter where they live, has access to basic services like healthcare, schools, and roads. Whether you're from downtown Toronto, a small town in Saskatchewan, or a remote fishing village in Newfoundland, in theory, you should still be able to see a doctor, send your kids to school, and drive on a safe highway.
Now, how does the government decide which province gets what?
The federal government starts by looking at every province's ability to raise money. This ability to raise money, also fiscal capacity, is measured across 5 main categories: personal income taxes, business income taxes, consumption taxes, property taxes, and natural resource revenues.
In simple terms, it's about how much money a province could collect through taxes if they taxed people and businesses at the same rates across the whole Canada. From there, we establish a national average.
Then, we look at each province's per capita fiscal capacity and compare it to the national averages of all 10 provinces. If the province is below the national average, it gets an equalization payment to top up the difference. This is done not to erase the gap, but to help close it. If the province is above the national average, it gets nothing.
For example, Alberta can raise about $17,000 per person through taxes, and PEI can only raise around $8,000. With the national average of around $12,000 per capita, PEI qualifies for compensation. They are not being rewarded for being poor. It means they need a bit of help to offer basic services like healthcare and education without putting extra strain on their residents.
Now, this formula isn't just a simple math equation. It has a few other features built in to make the system fairer and more stable over time, in theory, because provinces like Alberta and Newfoundland earn a lot from oil and gas. There's also a GDP growth ceiling that limits how fast the total equalization payments can grow each year, even if economy booms.
On top of that, there is a fiscal capacity cap, which means that even if a province gets equalization, it can't end up richer than provinces that don't get anything.
This is what this formula looks like in a simple way, and it's reviewed every 5 years. The next review will take place in 2029.
So with all of this, you are probably starting to wonder, Why should a province with a stronger economy be responsible for supporting others?
It's a fair question, and it's one that has sparked heated debates across Canada for decades. In some cases, it's even fueled talks of separation, especially in provinces like Alberta and Saskatchewan. Many people feel it's unfair that hard-working provinces end up footing the bill for others. And if you were to stop watching this video here, you'd walk away with the same feeling of unfairness. I know I had that when I was working on this video, until we dug deeper.
What we have found is that a lot of frustration around equalization comes from misunderstandings about how the system actually works. The most common statement I've been reading in comments is that Alberta funds Quebec, or the West funds the East.
Barriers, and François Legault, the new Premier of Quebec, says, we don't believe in oil in Quebec. Well, they sure believe in taking the money that is generated for Ottawa from Alberta principally, because of principally our oil sector.
Fiscally, it's not the case, since the money pot that gets distributed is the federal money taxation. Ottawa collects money and Ottawa redistributes money. There's no check exchange between Alberta and Quebec as provinces.
But frustration that Albertans feel is not unreasonable. The equalization program was created in 1957. Alberta received some payments back then, but ever since 1961, Alberta hasn't received any payments at all.
Alberta has a resource-rich economy. People living there earn high incomes, so individuals fall into higher federal tax brackets, and therefore pay higher income federal tax.
Well, high earners in general pay for everything in this country, whether you're in Nova Scotia or Northern Territories. Top 10% of Canadian top earners pay 50% of all personal income taxes.
Albertans often end up paying more, simply because Alberta has some of the highest median incomes in the country. And naturally, higher incomes usually mean higher spending on homes, cars, services, you name it.
And our deficit is largely a choice that we make. We have above average levels of spending and below average levels of taxation. And historically, we could bridge the gap between those two sides of the budget through resource revenues, primarily from oil and gas.
Even though Alberta doesn't have a provincial sales tax like most provinces, every time Albertans buy something, they still pay the federal GST. And since they tend to spend more overall, they naturally pay more GST into the federal pot. Another thing worth mentioning is that Albertans tend to rely less on old age security and other federal support programs. That's because Alberta has one of the youngest populations in Canada, and that means fewer seniors are drawing on federal benefits like old age security.
Instead, a larger share of population is working, earning incomes and paying taxes, which helps fuel federal revenues without putting as much pressure on federal spending. In simple terms, Alberta's younger, working-age population contributes more to the national pot and takes out a lot less in benefits, at least right now.
And yet, for all those contributions, the services they receive from the federal government don't match what they pay in.
For the last 10 years, successive Liberal governments in Ottawa, supported by their new Democrat allies, have unleashed a tidal wave of laws, policies, and political attacks aimed directly at Alberta's free economy, and in effect, against the future and livelihoods of our people.
So we fully share the Albertan frustration, but also understand a little better why Albertans simply don't get to use what they're entitled to.
Interestingly, when oil and gas industry experienced its downs, Alberta still didn't qualify for equalization payments.
Saying, you know what, we might be on the verge of having separatism raise its head in Alberta again. So
that's why Premier of Alberta pushes for change. But despite growing calls for reform, there has never been a sensible or viable proposal that would include Alberta under the current formula.
The disconnect between what they give and what they get is what fuels so much resentment. Alberta does not profit from equalization program.
Saying that Canada is milking Alberta without giving anything in return would not be factually correct either. Alberta does receive support, just not in the form of direct payments. Both before the equalization program was introduced and even after, Alberta has benefited in many important ways, including workers from other provinces who flock to Alberta to help build the oil industry, that in turn creates and fills jobs that fuel the province's economy, as well as food and goods shipped in from farms, factories and businesses across the country, keeping Alberta supplied and connected to the rest of Canada. Strong Alberta's economy means capital investments from financial hubs like Toronto and Montreal, fueling everything from real estate to energy development. National infrastructure like railways and pipelines that keep Alberta's economy running are often funded or supported by federal policy, like steel and equipment sourced from other provinces to build pipelines. Historically, federal support in starting Alberta's oil production included research and development that helped unlock early extraction technologies.
Alberta's success was never built in isolation. It's been, and it still is, a two-way street. This situation is a lot like living in the penthouse in a condo building. You pay the highest condo fees, but when repairs are needed, it's the public areas that get repaired that you don't even use, since you have your own hot tub on the rooftop.
Nevertheless, this doesn't erase Alberta's frustration, but it shows that Canada's economy is interconnected. Equalization is just one piece of a more complex puzzle that is national economy.
Canada is a country that leans towards social policies. We like the idea of helping each other out, it seems. But when it comes to equalization, many feel it crosses the line. They worry that the system rewards laziness or bad decision-making. And honestly, that's a fair concern. If provinces know that the support is guaranteed, where's the pressure to fix their own problems, right? That fuels the Alberta versus Quebec narrative a lot, where Albertans feel that Quebec, who receives one of the highest equalization payment proportions, is freeloading.
But here's the other side of it. Quebec actually has some of the highest personal tax rate in the country. They are not just sitting back and freeloading. Their residents already pay heavily into their own system too.
That's why Quebec will probably never separate from Canada, because even with the high personal tax, they still need additional payments.
You might have heard about Norway's famous oil fund, officially known as the Government Pension Fund. They started it back in the 1990s, investing their oil profits instead of spending them all right away. Today is the largest sovereign wealth fund in the world, worth over $1 trillion.
Now you might be wondering, could Alberta have built a fund like Norway's and avoided the boom and bust cycles instead of these equalization payments?
Alberta's Heritage Savings Trust Fund was created back in 1976. It was funded with oil revenues, and the original vision was bold: invest the money and use it to secure the province's future long after the oil was gone. But over time, governments started dipping into the fund to cover budget deficits, especially during downturns. Instead of letting it grow untouched like Norway did, a lot of it was spent. Today, the fund sits at around 21 billion, much smaller than it could have been if the original vision had been protected.
Saskatchewan also has a smaller resource savings fund, but again, it's nothing close to the scale of Norway. Now, it's important to be clear, equalization payments didn't cause Alberta's budget deficits. The real issue was provincial political choices, choosing short-term spending and tax cuts instead of long-term saving.
Let's imagine Canada builds a Norway-style fund. To make that happen, the provinces would have to capture a larger share of current and future resource revenues. This means more royalties, higher taxes, or saving budget surpluses. The federal tax each individual pays is sadly untouchable, regardless of how unsatisfied provinces are about how it's spent or redistributed by Ottawa. Politicians of all stripes must commit not to touch the principle, only use small, stable withdrawals. This would also require intra-provincial cooperation, Alberta, Saskatchewan, maybe even BC and Manitoba, to create a regional sovereign fund. Lastly, we would need a new legislation that locks down spending rules permanently and survives election cycles.
With all that, we still wonder, what would a Canada's National Sovereign Fund look like? That's a question for the country's top economists. And it may technically be reasonable. Realistically speaking, not so fast.
Imagine this. You're from Nova Scotia. You moved to Alberta when you were young to build your career, chase opportunity, and make a good living. But years later, when it's time to retire, you decide to go back home, back to Nova Scotia. Thanks to equalization payments, your home province now has better health care, roads, and public services than it might have had otherwise. In a way, equalization doesn't just support provinces, it supports Canadians, giving us the freedom to move, work, and eventually retire wherever feels like home.
Not all provinces are created equal. Some have a higher cost of living than others. So why doesn't everybody move to places with lower housing prices and affordable cost of living? Cost of living is typically associated with lower desirability. There are often less jobs, worse schools, worse healthcare and infrastructure. Equalization payments help level out the playing field, helping make less populated areas a little more livable by funding upgrades to attract more workforce and drive economy up. Eventually, these places will get better equipped to welcome population growth.
But there is one big problem that needs to be talked about. In 2023, British Columbia and Newfoundland and Labrador filed a lawsuit against the federal government. Their argument was that equalization formula is not just outdated, it's unfair and even politically biased.
We feel that it's unreasonable for BC taxpayers to be sending money to the federal government to be distributed to provinces like Ontario through the equalization program.
They claim that Ontario, Canada's most vote-rich province, continues to receive equalization payments, even though provinces like BC and Newfoundland, facing real fiscal pressures, receive less or nothing at all.
For the courts to evaluate the fairness of it, the mathematical calculation.
And this isn't about numbers anymore. There is a growing belief that equalization decisions are clouded by political agendas, with federal funding favoring provinces that are crucial during elections, rather than those with the greatest need. That perception, true or not, adds fuel to the growing sense of regional alienation, especially in the provinces that feel economically overlooked, politically undersupported.
And since the equalization formula gets reviewed only every 5 years, these decisions are inflexible relative to provincial economic changes.
This is a list of equalization payments that provinces are receiving in 2025-26.
Where does all this money go to specifically?
We don't know. There's no database of equalization-funded projects because the money isn't tied to specific programs. It just flows into general provincial budgets, often with very little public explanation. Provinces have no obligation to publicly report how that money is spent. Equalization payments are unconditional, meaning that provinces can use the money for any purpose that they feel necessary. We don't even know whether municipal governments, who are the closest to their people, get a cut, and whether they can help decide how to spend the money in the first place.
So does this mean the equalization system is absolutely unjustifiable?
Well, to answer this question, let's look at those who actually do this well. Switzerland, Belgium, Australia, and Germany have similar equalization programs.
In Germany, they have a similar system, but with less drama. It's called Länderfinanzausgleich, or equalization of the federal states. It's a system that redistributes tax revenues among Germany's 16 federal states, Länder, for the same fiscal capacity reasons as Canada. And its purpose is rather similar to Canada, but with a few key differences. First, it's non-political. The rules are set by law, not by negotiations between states, so there is no yearly drama over who deserves what. Second, it's fully transparent and reviewed annually, so everyone knows exactly how contributions and payments are calculated. Third, both what you pay in and what you receive are clear and predictable. There are no surprises. And finally, the system doesn't just look at income levels, it also considers the actual costs of delivering services in different regions, making it more responsive to real-world needs. Since in Germany people know what to expect, that predictability means fewer public fights about fairness.
The German system removes much of the political emotion. It's seen more like a tax duty rather than a handout. That reduces resentment and increases support. Canadians have proposed lots of great ideas over the years to improve how equalization payments are calculated and handled. First, just make it less political and more transparent. That means stopping automatic payment increases and updating the formula more often with real numbers. Don't wait for 5 years, do it annually. Factoring in cost of living differences, rewarding efficient spending is what Germany and Belgium already do, and it helps keep things a lot fairer for everyone.
Equalization was designed to build a more unified Canada, not a divided one. But unity only works when it feels fair, transparent, and accountable.
The way the system is currently designed, it doesn't make people feel good about helping rural or remote provinces. Instead, they feel they're obliged to support resource-poor provinces without any reward for it, which leads to division, especially in Western provinces.
Right now, there is a trust gap. And it's not just about money, it's about how decisions are made and who is held accountable.
Have you ever lived in a both have and have not provinces? What's your take? Is equalization helping or just creating tension?
Let us know in the comments below. We would love to hear your stories.
And if you enjoyed this video, hit the like button below and share this video with someone who still thinks provinces write checks to each other.
If the YouTube algorithm got it right, you will enjoy this video next, and we will see you there. Take care.